He's too quiet to be a superstar, the ESPN analyst said dismissively after Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's 35-point performance against the Lakers. Great players need that killer instinct, that edge. This kid just doesn't have it. What that analyst didn't know was that he was watching the most dangerous type of player in basketball, the silent killer who destroys opponents without saying a word. The date was March 15, 2024. The Oklahoma City Thunder had just dismantled the Los Angeles Lakers 128-110, with Shai scoring 35 points on an efficient 13 of 20 shooting. But as the final buzzer sounded, there were no wild celebrations, no trash talk, no demonstrative gestures toward the crowd. Shai simply walked off the court with the same composed expression he wore during warm-ups. In the post-game press conference, reporters peppered him with questions about his dominant performance. "Shai, you just outplayed LeBron James and Anthony Davis. How does that feel?" His response was vintage Shai. "It feels good to get the win. That's what matters most." No bravado, no bulletin board material, just quiet professionalism that drove highlight-obsessed media members crazy. "Where's the personality?" complained sports talk show host Marcus Williams during his radio show the next morning. "Superstars are supposed to be larger than life. This guy plays like a robot." But Marcus Williams didn't understand what coaches and players around the league were beginning to recognize, that Shai's calm demeanor wasn't a weakness, it was his greatest weapon. Thunder assistant coach Dave Bliss, a 15-year NBA veteran who had played alongside some of the game's most competitive players, had never seen anything quite like Shai's approach to basketball. Most elite players try to intimidate opponents with trash talk or aggressive body language, Bliss explained to head coach Mark Daigneault during a film session. Shai intimidates them with competence. He just shows up and executes, game after game, without any emotional variance. That consistency is terrifying for opponents. The psychological impact was undeniable. When players faced Shai, they couldn't read his emotional state, couldn't tell if their defensive strategies were working, couldn't gauge whether he was frustrated or confident. He was a basketball enigma, completely unreadable and utterly reliable. This approach had been shaped by an encounter early in Shai's career that most people never heard about. During his rookie season with the LA Clippers, Shai had tried to engage in trash talk during a game against the Golden State Warriors. After hitting a difficult three-pointer over Klay Thompson, young Shai had stared down the veteran and said something he thought was intimidating. Thompson's response was swift and humbling. He proceeded to score 18 points in the next 6 minutes, including 4 consecutive three-pointers that essentially ended the game. After the final shot, Thompson jogged past the rookie and said something that would change Shai's entire approach to basketball. "Kid, let your game do the talking." That night, Shai called his father, Vaughn, who had played professional basketball in Europe and understood the mental aspects of the game better than most. "Dad, I think I've been approaching this wrong," Shai said, recounting the Thompson encounter. "I was trying to be someone I'm not." Vaughn's response would become the foundation of Shai's basketball philosophy. "Son, the most dangerous opponents are the ones you can't figure out. Be unpredictable by being completely predictable, just dominate quietly." But what nobody could have predicted was how devastating this approach would become when combined with Shai's rapidly developing skill set. By his 3rd season in Oklahoma City, Shai had mastered the art of silent dominance. He would arrive at arenas 2 hours before games, go through the same precise warm-up routine, and interact with opponents with polite professionalism that bordered on psychological warfare. During a November game against the Miami Heat, veteran guard Kyle Lowry tried every trick in his playbook to get under Shai's skin. He pressed him full court, talked constantly, and even tried to draw technical fouls with exaggerated reactions to contact. Shai's response was to score 42 points while committing only 1 turnover. After each basket, he maintained the same neutral expression, never once acknowledging Lowry's antics. By the 4th quarter, Lowry was visibly frustrated, taking wild shots and picking up unnecessary fouls. "I've never played against anyone like that," Lowry admitted after the game. "Usually you can get in guys' heads, figure out what makes them tick. With him, it's like playing against a computer program." But the most revealing insight into Shai's psychological approach came from an unlikely source, the arena's veteran janitor, Robert Martinez, who had worked Thunder home games for 8 years. Robert had a unique perspective because he was always in the building during players' pregame routines, and he developed relationships with several Thunder players over the years. What he observed about Shai was something that never made it into any scouting report. "Most players, you can tell how they're feeling by watching their body language during warm-ups," Robert explained to a local reporter. "If they're nervous, excited, angry, it shows. But with Shai it's different. He's the same person whether he's about to play the Lakers on national TV or a Tuesday night game against Orlando." Robert had witnessed something during Shai's 3rd season that illustrated this point perfectly. Before a crucial playoff seeding game against the Denver Nuggets, the arena sound system malfunctioned during warm-ups, creating an eerie silence throughout the building. Most players were visibly uncomfortable with the unusual atmosphere. Some tried to create their own energy through elaborate celebrations after made shots. Others seemed distracted by the lack of musical motivation. Shai never altered his routine. He went through the same series of shots, the same stretching sequence, the same visualization exercises he performed before every game. When the sound system was finally fixed 20 minutes later, he didn't react to the sudden blast of music and crowd noise. "That's when I knew this kid was different," Robert said. "He doesn't need external energy because he generates all his motivation internally." This internal focus became Shai's trademark, but it also created an unexpected problem. His own teammates sometimes struggled to read his emotional state during crucial moments. However, what happened during the 2023 playoffs would demonstrate that Shai's quiet leadership style was actually more effective than traditional vocal approaches. During Game 4 of the Western Conference semifinals against the Golden State Warriors, the Thunder were trailing by 12 points with 8 minutes remaining. The crowd was deflated, and several young Thunder players looked overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. Instead of calling a timeout or delivering a fiery speech, Shai simply took control of the game through his actions. He scored 18 points in those final 8 minutes, but more importantly, he maintained the same calm demeanor that had defined his entire career. After each clutch shot, instead of celebrating wildly, he would make brief eye contact with each teammate and nod slightly, a gesture that somehow conveyed more confidence than any verbal encouragement could have provided. "When Shai stays calm, we all stay calm," teammate Josh Giddey explained after the Thunder's comeback victory. "He doesn't need to say anything because his energy is so steady. If he's not panicking, why should we?" But the defining moment of Shai's silent killer reputation came during the 2024 NBA Finals against the Boston Celtics. Game 6 in Boston was one of the most hostile environments in playoff history. Celtics fans were relentless, creating a wall of sound that made communication nearly impossible. Several Thunder players were visibly affected by the intensity, struggling to execute their normal offensive sets. With 2 minutes remaining and the Thunder clinging to a 3-point lead, Celtics guard Jaylen Brown tried to engage Shai in some psychological warfare. After being called for a foul, Brown got in Shai's face and shouted something that cameras couldn't pick up but was clearly intended to provoke a reaction. Shai's response was to look Brown directly in the eyes for 3 seconds without saying a word, then calmly walked to the free throw line. The silence was more intimidating than any comeback could have been. "That stare was ice cold," Brown admitted months later. "I've had guys scream at me, chest bump me, try to fight me. But having someone just look at you like that, completely unfazed, that actually got in my head more than anything else." Shai proceeded to make both free throws, then stole the ensuing inbound pass and scored on a fast break layup that essentially sealed the championship. Throughout the sequence, his expression never changed. As confetti fell and his teammates celebrated around him, Shai allowed himself a small smile, the most emotion he'd shown during the entire playoffs. But what truly set Shai apart wasn't just his game-time composure, it was how he approached the mental side of basketball preparation. Dr. Sarah Chin, a sports psychologist who worked with several NBA players, had never encountered an athlete with Shai's level of mental discipline. Although she couldn't discuss specific clients, she provided insight into the mindset that separates good players from great ones. "Elite athletes often talk about getting into the zone," Dr. Chin explained. "But the truly special ones don't wait for the zone to find them, they live there permanently. They've trained their minds to operate at peak efficiency regardless of external circumstances." This mental training was something Shai had developed through years of deliberate practice. During his second season in Oklahoma City, he began working with meditation instructor Michael Torres, learning techniques that would enhance his already impressive focus. Shai approached mental training the same way he approached physical training, Torres recalled. "Most athletes want quick fixes or dramatic breakthroughs. He was content to work on breathing exercises and visualization techniques for hours, seeking marginal improvements that would compound over time. The results of this mental conditioning became apparent during high-pressure situations where other players might experience performance anxiety or emotional overwhelm. However, there was one moment when Shai's stoic facade nearly cracked, providing a rare glimpse into the intense competitor that existed beneath his calm exterior. During a February game against his former team, the LA Clippers, several opposing players made comments about his lack of personality and leadership presence. The criticism was clearly designed to provoke an emotional response that might disrupt his usual steady performance. For 3 quarters, Shai appeared unaffected, playing his typical efficient game. But early in the fourth quarter, after Clippers guard Russell Westbrook made a particularly pointed comment about fake leaders, something shifted in Shai's demeanor. He didn't become visibly angry or start talking trash. Instead, he began playing with a cold precision that bordered on ruthless. Over the next 12 minutes, he scored 28 points on perfect shooting, including 7 consecutive three-pointers that left the Clippers' defense completely demoralized. After the final three-pointer, a contested shot from 30 feet that put the game out of reach, Shai allowed himself one moment of satisfaction. He stared directly at the Clippers' bench for exactly 3 seconds before jogging back on defense. "I've never seen anything like it," said TNT analyst Charles Barkley during the post-game show. "He didn't say a word, didn't celebrate, didn't showboat. He just systematically destroyed them." That's scary. But perhaps the most telling example of Shai's psychological impact came from an unexpected source: opposing team scouts and coaches who had to prepare strategies specifically designed around his mental toughness. Boston Celtics assistant coach Tony Williams spent weeks studying film before their finals matchup, trying to identify emotional triggers that might disrupt Shai's composure. "We looked for patterns, situations where he might get frustrated, referee calls that might affect his demeanor, defensive strategies that could make him force shots," Williams explained after the series. "We couldn't find anything. He was the same player whether he was having a great night or struggling with his shot." This consistency forced opposing teams to abandon traditional psychological tactics and focus purely on basketball fundamentals, an approach that actually played into Shai's strengths as a supremely skilled player. The ripple effects of Shai's silent dominance extended beyond individual games and began influencing how young players throughout the basketball world approached mental preparation. High school and college coaches started teaching Shai-style, emotional control to their players. Basketball camps began incorporating meditation and visualization exercises into their curricula. Even youth league coaches were encouraging kids to play like Shai, calm, focused, and unshakable. But what many observers missed was that Shai's quiet approach wasn't about suppressing emotion. It was about channeling it productively. During a rare in-depth interview, Shai provided insight into his mental approach that helped explain his unique psychological profile. "People think being calm means not caring," he said, "but it's actually the opposite. I care so much about winning that I've trained myself to remove any emotions that might interfere with that goal. Every celebration, every reaction, every word, if it doesn't help us win, I don't do it." This philosophy extended to how he handled media obligations, interactions with fans, and even relationships with teammates. Everything was filtered through the lens of championship pursuit. However, there were moments when Shai's human side emerged, providing glimpses of the passion that drove his mechanical excellence. After winning the 2024 NBA championship, during the private team celebration away from cameras, several teammates described a side of Shai they'd never seen before. For about 20 minutes, he allowed himself to experience the full emotional weight of accomplishing his ultimate goal. "He actually cried," revealed Josh Giddey during a podcast appearance months later. "Not sad tears, pure joy tears. It was the first time I'd ever seen him let his guard down completely." Then, after about 20 minutes, he was back to being the same composed leader we knew. But by the next morning, when cameras and reporters arrived for championship interviews, Shai had returned to his typical measured demeanor. "It feels good to accomplish this goal," he said when asked about winning his first title. "Now we start working toward the next one." The transformation back to his public persona was so complete that many observers wondered if they had imagined any emotional displays from the night before. As Shai entered his 7th NBA season, his reputation as basketball's silent killer was firmly established. Opponents knew they were facing someone who couldn't be rattled, couldn't be intimidated, and couldn't be psychologically manipulated. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Shai's approach was how it had begun inspiring players throughout the league to reconsider their own emotional approaches to basketball. Young stars like Paolo Banchero and Chet Holmgren began adopting elements of Shai's psychological discipline. Veteran players started working with mental performance coaches to develop better emotional control. Even notoriously fiery competitors were experimenting with quieter approaches during crucial moments. Shai changed the template for what a superstar looks like, observed longtime NBA coach Stan Van Gundy. "You don't have to be the loudest guy in the room to be the most impactful. Sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous." The statistical evidence supported this observation. During clutch situations, defined as moments when the score difference is 5 points or less with 2 minutes remaining, Shai's performance actually improved compared to his regular game statistics. While most players experience some degree of performance decline under pressure, he seemed to thrive in high-stress situations. Sports science researchers began studying this phenomenon, trying to understand how Shai's mental approach translated to superior physical performance when stakes were highest. Michael Rodriguez, who led a study on pressure performance in professional athletes, found that Shai's heart rate and stress hormone levels remained remarkably stable during clutch moments compared to other elite players. "Most athletes experience physiological spikes during high-pressure situations," Rodriguez explained. "Their heart rates increase, their breathing becomes shallow, their muscle tension rises. These changes can negatively impact fine motor skills like shooting accuracy. Shai's ability to maintain physiological calm during crucial moments gives him a measurable advantage. But the real test of Shai's silent killer mentality came during his quest for back-to-back championships in the 2024-25 season. With expectations higher than ever and every opponent treating Thunder games like playoff contests, Shai faced a new level of scrutiny and defensive attention. Teams were designing entire game plans around trying to disrupt his psychological equilibrium. The Philadelphia 76ers, coached by former player Nick Nurse, implemented what they called Operation Emotion, a strategy specifically designed to provoke reactions from Shai through constant chatter, hard fouls, and referee manipulation. For 3 quarters, the strategy appeared to be working. Shai was shooting below his season average and seemed slightly out of rhythm. Several sports commentators wondered if teams had finally found a way to get into his head. But what happened in the 4th quarter reminded everyone why Shai had earned his reputation as basketball's most mentally tough player. Instead of forcing shots or trying to prove a point, Shai adapted his approach in real time. He began getting teammates involved, finding open shooters and creating easy scoring opportunities for others. When the 76ers defense overcompensated by helping off his teammates, he went back to his individual dominance. The Thunder won 115-108, with Shai finishing with 31 points, 9 assists and 0 turnovers. After the game, 76ers coach Nick Nurse admitted that their psychological strategy had backfired. "We thought we could get him out of his comfort zone," Nurse said. "Instead, he just found a different way to beat us." That's what separates good players from great ones, the ability to win in multiple ways without getting emotionally involved in the battle. As the 2024-25 season progressed toward another potential championship run, Shai's silent killer reputation had evolved into something even more powerful, a psychological weapon that affected opponents before games even began. Players around the league admitted that facing Shai created a unique type of mental pressure. They knew they were going up against someone who couldn't be shaken, couldn't be provoked, and couldn't be counted out regardless of the situation. "It's like playing chess against a computer," explained Miami Heat guard Tyler Herro after a particularly frustrating loss to the Thunder. "You can't read his next move because there are no emotional tells. He just executes whatever the optimal play is, every single time." This psychological impact extended beyond individual matchups and began affecting entire team dynamics. Opponents would often become so focused on trying to get reactions from Shai that they lost sight of their overall game plan. During a late-season game against the Denver Nuggets, several Nuggets players became so obsessed with trying to engage Shai emotionally that they committed costly turnovers and took ill-advised shots while attempting to prove points that only existed in their own minds. "We got caught up trying to beat him one-on-one instead of playing team basketball," admitted Nuggets forward Aaron Gordon after their loss. "That's exactly what he wants, for you to abandon your system and try to match his individual brilliance." As playoff time approached, Shai's reputation as basketball's ultimate silent killer was at its peak. He had proven that dominance didn't require loud proclamations or emotional displays. Sometimes, the most powerful statement was no statement at all. The young analyst who had once dismissed him as too quiet for Stardom was now among his biggest supporters, having learned that greatness comes in many forms. "I was completely wrong about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander," he admitted during a live broadcast. "I thought superstars had to be larger than life, had to dominate the headlines as much as they dominated games. He taught me that sometimes, the most dangerous opponents are the ones who let their actions speak for themselves." As another championship run loomed, basketball fans and analysts were learning to appreciate a different type of superstar, one who conquered through consistency rather than chaos, who intimidated through competence rather than confrontation, and who had mastered the lost art of being a silent killer in a loud world. In Oklahoma City, where championship banners were becoming an annual tradition, they understood that sometimes the quietest players make the loudest statements. And in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, they had discovered the most dangerous type of competitor, the one who destroys opponents without ever raising his voice.